We reflected on the disorder with Lorna Cunningham, who is the Deputy General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation, and Danny Phillips, who is a community campaigner who wants to see a ban on the public sale of fireworks. Lorna, what was the mood among officers last night? What's morale like?
John, I think it's quite difficult to determine just now. Obviously, there was a number of officers injured, as you know, last night, and I feel quite left out, I think, and they were short. There was obviously a resourcing issue last night, and it appears that we've got the numbers wrong due to the number of officers across the country that have been injured. So I think they are feeling quite upset this morning about it all.
And just talk us through what the tactics were last night. We've seen some of the aerial footage. What was the police approach last night?
I mean, I think we always look for a proportionate policing response, and we look to only arrest where it's necessary. But I think it's clear from the numbers of officers on the scene that we don't have sufficient numbers in order to carry out arrests. We don't have the vehicles in order to take arrested persons away, and it's clear that we couldn't do any dispersal activity. So all the officers were left with was holding a line.
And some people might observe and say, well, why were you holding the line? Why were the police officers holding a line? Why weren't they not more proactive and going towards the people causing the disturbance?
Well, obviously, I wasn't there, so I can't say specifically for the footage that we've seen. However, holding the line is to maintain some sort of order in the communities, to make sure that it's contained in as small an area as possible to prevent that widespread damage to homes and to other persons in the public. So I think it's really just about making sure we can gather evidence. So there would have been evidence gathering teams there as well, and hopefully they'll be looking through footage today to identify the persons responsible.
Danny, you've been through something similar. Your community was affected, Pollock Shields, a few years ago. What's it like being a community when there's this disturbance with the fireworks?
Oh, I mean, it's terrifying. I mean, it's really, really stressful situation to be in. I mean, we've had problems in our area in Pollock Shields. I have to stress, Pollock Shields is a lovely place to live. We just have this difficulty with fireworks. We've had it for over a decade, and in 2018 it just culminated in what the police themselves called a firework riot. I mean, I saw and with my own eyes, large industrial-sized fireworks being fired at the police. I mean, I felt for the police who are out there trying to deal with it. But for us in the community, I mean, it's a horrible experience. It's not nice. It's for some, it's terrifying. I tell you, there were parents with, for example, disabled children. If you're autistic, that is really stressful for those kids. We had, lone parents were speaking to me about being at home with a couple of young kids and finding it really stressful. So it's hard, and I just don't think we should live like that. And if the police are being, when we phone the police, it takes them a long time to respond because of all the work that they're overrun on these evenings. So we have to wait for for something to happen. So we're all locked in our homes and with our curtains closed and our shutters closed. And I just don't see why we should have to put up with that. For what reason? I don't understand.
Would you? I know you're not in charge, obviously, Lorna, but why might the police have been under-resourced, given that we know what happens on bonfire night?
Well, I think that we're facing a crisis, really, of funding in the service just now. And, the SPA and the government are scrutinising, rightly so, the spend that the police are having over budget, and particularly in overtime. So this event was run on officers who were currently on duty and those who had their rest day cancelled and a re-rostered rest day put in the bank for them, if you like. So numbers are really thin. We obviously had the semi-finals this weekend, and any protests that were planned or intel was received that those were going to go ahead. So officers are spread really thinly across the country, and I think we have a finite resource just now, and with the lack of the use of overtime, it makes it really difficult, and it's a real challenge to try and get to all the communities that need us on this type of event.
And Danny, what causes this? Why do people do this? Why do they behave like that?
Well, at the core of it is these fireworks. They are, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, Catherine wheels and Roman candles and sparklers and and at the end of the night your dad would set off a big rocket and he'd put it in a milk bottle and these fireworks have totally changed. I mean, they're called Armageddon, 500 shots, total wipeout, 64 repeater, nuclear attack. These are massive industrial fireworks which we allow people to buy and just set off in our communities. Now, some of them are on private land and there's not a lot we can do about that, but a lot of them are fired on public land or on the street, or fired horizontally up and down the street against buildings, against windows. And I just, personally, I would ban them except for organised displays so that the police could just get on with their job and what they need to be doing in protecting our communities, and the rest of us can just get a nice night. I mean, I don't understand why we put up with it.
We'll come to the banning in a moment, but what's the motivation of people attacking police? You're asking the wrong person. I don't understand it. I don't get. I mean, I imagine there's quite a bit that there's a culture change we need. There's possibly there's been cuts to youth services as well. There possibly is a certain section of. I mean, people keep talking about young people. These are young adults actually that are responsible for this as well. So I mean, I don't know why people, and on this particular night, I think it feels like an excuse to get explosives and then behave badly in your community. I don't understand. And briefly, Lorna, is there any understanding from your point of view as to why people target the police on this night in particular?
No, not particularly, John, and I think it just comes from this escalation we see in antisocial behaviour every year. And I suppose the studies that have been done recently through the SPA, it was actually published in 1919 magazine last month, shows that the public confidence in dealing with antisocial behaviour is really poor, and I think a lot of that comes down to the lack of officers we have in the communities now.
And just to expand then, Danny, on what you're saying about banning fireworks, is enough being done? Why is it not happening?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's taken 5... We have campaigned. Eventually we got the fireworks legislation and we were promised these no fireworks zones. That took 5 years. Councils didn't implement this year. Now, I'm not saying that's going to solve every problem, but it's make a huge difference if we can get a lot of these large-scale industrial fireworks out of our communities. They're saying now that they will introduce no fireworks zones where local authorities can say a certain area it's illegal to set off any type of firework. They'll do that next year. That's 6 years. 6 years since we started our campaign in 2018 that we've been trying to get some kind of action taken. People
what pushback are you getting as to why it's not happening?
They say that they've not had enough time. It takes time to get this legislation through. 6 years, really, to get some kind of action on this. I mean, we just need to regulate and restrict the use of these fireworks, and then we can talk about how we improve behaviour on these nights, or and how we take that forward. I'd give you a quick example is that a few years ago, because of the problems we had in 2018, the youth services in our area were given extra funding so they could walk the streets in the days before bonfire night and talk to young people, intervene if they were carrying fireworks, get them to come down to the youth centre instead. We had some kind of community displays that went on and stuff like that. It made a huge difference. But you get that for a year, and then you lose the resources in that community, and it moves on to another community. I think the key thing is just to get these industrial fireworks out of the communities so that we can just start, dealing with it in another way.
And finally, and briefly, would you support that, Lorna, the banning of fireworks?
Yeah, I think the SPF has always been supportive of, restricting who they're sold to and where they're used. The problem with having zones is that we tend to just displace the problem into another area, and that doesn't really solve it. But to solve it at source would be to stop them being sold to the wrong people.
Lorna and Danny, thank you both for joining us in Scotland tonight.